everybody. We are here, and we're here for the first video for the last March of the Tomb Kings. And this one is going to be a combination, a hobby cheating last March of the Tomb Kings video. And we are going to do painting a chariot, the skeleton chariots. I've got a couple set up here that are in my pledge for the last March, and I thought I'd take you through it real quick. Because one of the great things about, obviously chariots are a huge and important part of the Tomb King's force. And what I'll say is a couple, and unlike many other chariots, say like the Chaos chariots or something, which are big and huge and complicated, the Tomb King's chariots are actually quite simple. And you can paint these really fast. So what I'm going to do is walk you through how to paint a Tomb King's chariot quickly. To get it to a good standard where you'll be very happy with it. And we're going to use a combination of a lot of techniques that I've covered previously. So first things first, let's talk about subassembly. You'll notice that this is all assembled together with like the little thingy here on the side. I'll say this, I don't often stick these things on the side, like this, I don't know, these bows or whatever they are. You don't need them. In the end, it's silly extra accoutrement. You can if you want. That's got one. This one's got both. Honestly, I find them kind of annoying, but whatever you like. And so the other thing is, obviously, then the chariot's all put together. No horses, no charioteers. Step one to make your life easier. Do not put the charioteers in the chariot. Do not put the horses on the chariot. Don't even put the wheels on the chariot. These are best when they're in a lot of sub-assemblies, and I promise you, you will do these much faster if you don't go crazy with the sub-assemblies. Okay? Alright, so that part out of the way. The skeletons, like the actual horse is pulling the thing, and the guys inside are done by the skeleton technique I showed you in the previous video. So I've actually got those done, separate, ready to go. This is the last thing for this chariot. So I've primed it in my favorite color, which is just the German gray-black, always a fantastic color. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to do a little zenithal highlighting, because as usual, we're going to use our zenithal highlighting trick to make this our lives easier later. So we're going to start out with some Game Air Cold Gray. It's somewhat of a darker gray, and that's why I like it. Because I want to keep a fairly strong transition. And if I go with a pretty light gray, then I'm going to blow it away once I get the next color on, once I actually get my color layer on. So we're not going to worry about the wheels. They're just going to stay primed. And that's fine. They're good to go. Done. Because they're going to be completely gold later, so who cares? And what we're going to do with this gray is we're going to make sure we got some good flow here. We do. You can see, put about that much paint in, not too much. And we're just going to literally, at the front of the thing, start shooting it around like that. And you'll notice I'm just like, let me get that, make sure that's totally so you can see how I'm moving it. Just very light back and forth in this kind of an angle. Then I'm going to kind of get a little bit down here on the side. Don't worry about getting it on the symbol and thing up here, because this doesn't matter. Again, we're going to cover that with gold later. So who cares? So there we go. We've created that little ridge, brightest toward the front. Then we're going to take this center cross beam here. And we're just going to hit it with some gray. We want to focus the gray up toward the top and the middle. Okay? Because with long flat areas like this, it works best when you can create some kind of contrast. Then with the bow and arrow piece here, we're just going to, from the top down, we're going to basically shoot it, focusing on the corner. We're just rocking the trigger very slightly. Something like that. Okay. And then, most importantly, the wood inside. Okay. So for this, we're going to go at an angle very much like this. Like I'm going straight on to this here, because I want to not fill the ridges. So I'm going to just shoot it at a very, you know, like parallel angle to the thing. Okay, and then we'll come back and we'll show you how we're going to create some variation there. Now, I didn't try to coat it completely. You'll notice I left the interior right near the front of it darker. That was purposeful. And then finally, we're just going to shoot up at the top here on the inside. Okay? So there you go. That's that step prepped. Okay? So I'm going to do it again here on the other one real quick so you can see basically. I left this one on its base because who cares? And I left the wheels on because somebody that I got this secondhand from decided to glue them on. So they wouldn't come back off. And some of my chariots are secondhand. Alright, so same thing. We start in the front middle, focusing toward the center. Go down the sides just a little bit. On the arrows, we're going to focus toward the corner. Just little bits there. Just kind of giving it the old zenithal. Okay. Then on the wood inside, we go at our very flat angle. Because we want to leave the ridges nice and dark. And then a little bit up top there in the back. So we've got that inside. And then finally the crossbeam. We hit it with a little gray all the way through. And then like that. So it's brightest in the center. And there you go. That's our gray. Done and done. Step one. All right, next up. Next up is we get rid of the rest of this gray I had in my... You can see how little that took. Like I shot out a lot more than what I ended up using. Very little paint is the key here. Okay, so very quickly we're going to change out our airbrush here. That is to say we're going to shoot some cleaner through. Now, our next step is going to be to just continue the zenithal pattern. But again, we're doing it in a bit unusual way. That's the trick. We're not going from the top down. We're not using our normal angles. Instead, we're creating areas of interest on the model. Okay, so this time we're going to go for old Game Air Dead White. It's a color you don't often use in actual painting, but in undershading, it is gold. I have a lot of dead white because I use a lot of dead white. Okay. Because in the world of your undershading, this is the way to go. So, we mix it up there, holding the finger to the tip. You can see how little I have down in there. Not a lot. Move that other chariot to the side. So now, what are we going to do? Same thing again, just less. Okay, so we're going to start there in the center. And you'll notice I'm just barely rocking the trigger because I really just want to get that white right up there in the middle. I'm going to create a second little one down there and another one down there. Okay? So what we've got is sort of a triple light pattern there. Now on the crossbeam, we're just going to focus in right on that center point. Again, you notice how I'm moving the airbrush just slightly? We don't want to focus in and let the paint get too wet or build. We're just barely touching that trigger and just rocking the airbrush back and forth, right? And then on the inside here, on the wood, we're going to go at an angle, but we're not looking to coat the whole thing. Instead, we're just going to go right across the center there. Again, because we want to create a little highlight. And then up top, there you go. And that's basically, oh, the little arrow thing. See, I hate these arrow things. You always forget about them. All right, so same deal here. This is a more traditional zenithal thing with this, but we're just going to hit the corner, the top especially, and brighten that up. So, let's do it again. There's one down. One more to go. All right. So we rock slightly. We get that white. We get our little corner. See, leaving those bows on makes it a real problem. All right, we quick zenithal on the bows. Quick zenithal on the bows. We don't need to be incredibly careful. It's okay. Crossbeam. Rocking the airbrush. Nice and slow. I'm probably rocking the actual camera. That might have been a bit much, but that's okay. We can smooth that out. I was looking at the camera, not at what I was doing. Inside. And then we create our visual interest inside the wood. Okay? So, there we go. Now, we've got our two chariots undercoated here. Again, not traditional zenithal, right? We didn't go all from top down or anything like that. What we want to do, since these chariots are kind of big and flat and honestly can be very boring figs, what we want to do is we want to create those areas of visual interest by really changing the highlighting underneath them. And with the airbrush, we can do that. Now, you can do this same thing with a brush or a rattle can. It's a little trickier, obviously, with a rattle can to get that, very fine detail. But, like, with the wood inside, and you'll see a step we're going to do later, you can get a little tricky with it. Okay, so next up, my Tomb Kings are all done with the traditional turquoise. So we are going to, so I have a little special airbrush turquoise here made out of the Game Air, or Game Color turquoise. I'm sorry, not Game Air, Game Color turquoise. I can't find an airbrush turquoise I really love as much as this. But this is a very, very thin mix. I keep this purposely like hyper thin so I don't have to do much to it because it's meant to be my glazed turquoise. Okay, so we're going to put a few drops of that down in there. A little bit more because it's still very thin. I still put my normal 2 drops of thinner in. So I'm going to mix it up as usual. There we go. Make sure we've got some good flow. There we go. You can see what color that comes out to over the white. Okay. All right. Now, let's get rid of that one. Let's get to the better one. So what we're going to do here is we're going to put our finger in the middle, right? Like I'm literally going to just mask like that because I don't really care too much about overspray, but this helps me just kind of control it. Okay? So then what am I going to do? I'm going to take that turquoise and again, just very slightly rocking the trigger. I'm going to go over everything here that's going to be turquoise. And so what we get, and I'm actually going to make sure, I'm making sure we're nice and thin because I don't want to cover up my undershading, right? And so what we get is that you can see the difference in the lightness of it between where it was white and where it was dark, right? Now, we're going to do the same thing with the cross beam there. I turned basically my chariots like hyper turquoise, by the way. My Tomb Kings are 2 color. If you had the more traditional, say, turquoise and red, this would be even easier because you could do like your cross beams in red or whatever you happen to do. Doesn't really matter. Red is a naturally very transparent color, and so we'll do the same thing. If your Tomb Kings are purple or green, all of that's fine. So you can see we're just rocking the trigger, and you can see how that's turning turquoise, but leaving that color difference in place, right? And we're going to turn over the other side, and that's just on the underside of the model. Nobody really sees it, so we don't really care too much. We're just trying to get it that color. Honestly, it doesn't really matter. These chariots are like glued like this. I don't paint the very underside of the thing because you can't see it, so who cares? Okay, inside, same deal. We want to turn the inside of the thing. If you want to turn the inside of the thing turquoise, you can. I'm not going to for reasons you'll see later, but you could. So then the last piece is we just need to hit this little guy on the side here. Our little, we need to hit our little, I don't know, bow holder. I do like to turn theirs turquoise as well. And then I just go and I'm actually just going to re-whiten the top part later. So same thing. You can see there we've cleaned that up. Okay? So there we go. That's turquoise. All right, we're going to do that one more time. See, it's nice that I have 2 to paint. You can see me do it twice. Okay. So here we go. Same thing. We're going to do a very gentle, nice, thin, light touch. We don't need to get it all the first time. Turning the whole, the body of the thing turquoise. We're going to get the spear holder here. And then we're going to get the crossbeam. And that's the reason we really did want to over highlight, because we need that color to show through. For our next steps. Okay. So there you go. We've turned our crossbeam that color. We've got those painted. And already we're looking like a chariot, right? And remember, the key where you can do this, because you got a lot of metallics, and those are going to change color later, so who cares? All right, so that's good to go. And actually thinking about this, I'm going to want this bow to be turquoise later too, so I'm going to go ahead and hit that right now. Since we're here, why not? I'll do it to the other one. Normally I would have zenithal those, but then I forgot that I wanted these to be turquoise, and that's okay. We can do a little highlighting with that later. Not a big deal. Thin little thing like that, that'll only take a minute. Okay. So there you go. Our 2 chariots. This step ready to go. When we pick up next, we're going to be back at the desk, and we're going to show you how we paint the rest of it quite quickly. All right? Very good. See you in a minute. All right, and we're back at the desk. And so now we're going to do the next steps to get this these 2 chariots in order. So the first thing we want to do is to set ourselves up for success later on this, what's wood inside here. We're going to, basically we need to create some more extreme highlights. So we're just going to take a little ivory, and we're going to dry brush that on. I don't think I need to explain, hopefully, what dry brushing is. If you're watching this at this point, hopefully you know. But obviously I get my, a little bit on my brush, get it mostly gone of paint, and I'm just going to very quickly run it back and forth over the top inside there. Now I'm not looking to get everything, because again, it doesn't matter. 1, there's going to be 2 skeletons standing on this, so we don't want to waste too much time. 2, I don't want it to be even. I actually want quite the opposite. I want there to be areas where it's brighter, areas where it's darker, because that's going to help. So the key is I need some of it to be rather extreme. So there we go. Okay, and that's done. Easy enough. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to let that dry, because I don't want to put down, because we're going to use a very heavy ink over that, and it'll pull up the paint if I don't make sure that that dry brush is completely dry. We're going to use a lot of the gold on here, but we're going to save that for the end, since we're going to use the alcohol-based gold, but you can use anything you want. So the next thing is to pick out anything that is going to be not gold. And so for that, like, what I'm going to turn not gold is going to be like the tops here of this, I don't know, like bow and spear holder, things like that. Okay? By the way, one quick thing I did do, I didn't like quite how thin my turquoise was when I had it in there, so I ended up just dropping in a drop of white into the turquoise I had left in the gun and shooting it back at the front in here, just to recreate the highlights a little stronger. So what we're going to do now is I'm using the Vallejo Heavy Opaque, or Extra Opaque, Heavy Warm Gray, which is the weirdest color name, because it doesn't, like, when you look at that, that doesn't look warm gray. I mean, I guess it kind of does, but it is a sort of pinky off-white gray. It's a very interesting color. I actually use it quite frequently to undercoat, like when I want to do bone over something that I've primed in darker colors or something of that nature. So the key here is we're just going to go through. We're going to pick out all of this that's going to become ivory. And you notice how much that covers. That's why I love that extra opaque. It has an unbelievably solid coverage. Okay. One important thing to do is, when you start here, just make sure you think about what you want your colors to be. As always, you want to be making sure you're thinking about, your color scheme before you lay down your paint. Now, you don't always have to have things completely decided, and it's okay to call an audible if when you get into the middle, you realize, hey, something's not working, right? That's okay. Don't be a slave to it, but at the same time, you don't want to be surprised by it. That's really what it boils down to. Okay. All right, so there's those. Then we're also going to hit the little strappy things here in the middle. There's like the Tomb Kings things have these little straps here. So we're going to hit those so we can turn those an ivory color. Very quickly, we're going to leave the deeper areas beside them dark, intentionally, because that's just going to be our shadows later when we hit that with a very strong wash. All right, we'll get the other one. And what we're doing here is just, picking out those things that didn't work with turquoise and didn't work with our highlighting scheme. I mean, it's really that simple with the zenithal highlighting, because we want to put down a nice undercoat to turn these white. If you've got a very heavy base, that's fine. What I love about these is about the extra opaque line from Vallejo is that they stay thin. They don't show brush strokes, but they have incredible coverage, and that's because they have an extremely dense pigment count. I've heard that they perform very similar to the old Citadel foundation line, but I don't know. I never use those. So there we go. We turn that white. It's pretty much that easy. Okay, so I won't do the second one here on camera. Instead, I'll just jump ahead and do what I'm going to do as my next step. And off camera, I'll do the other one, in between when we do the next step. The advantage of the wet palette is certainly that my paint's going to stay ready for me. So I'm going to take that same ivory I just dry brushed with. And now we're going to just go over this. Of course, we watered down our ivory, keep it nice and thin. But now the advantage is that I've got this ready to go because I just used it to dry brush. And again, we want to always, whenever we're doing this, one of the keys is you want to always make sure that, you're aligning your paints and your steps. Didn't have to switch paints. Didn't have to get a new paint out. When you want to get things done quickly, even the order in which you paint is very important. You want to make sure you're doing all your washes simultaneously, things like that, If you're going to wash of a certain color in certain places, make sure that you've got all those things done so you can do all those washes at once. And that sort of thing. And if I get a little paint on the side, like out into this, it doesn't matter because I'm going to turn it gold anyways, so it's fairly irrelevant. Okay, so we just keep turning all of this white. That warm gray from the extra opaque warm gray works as such a nice undercoat to that, to like an ivory color or a bone color. Oop. Don't know why, it just does. And yes, I am holding these in my hand, and that's why I'm using the glove, because I need to turn them a lot, and these annoying chariots don't like to sit on the, on like a cap or something like that very easily. You can do it, but they're kind of annoying, so I just thought I'd use a glove so I could hold it without touching it and getting my gross finger oil all over it and ruining your work. Try not to hold your models with your hands. It's never a good practice. If you absolutely can't avoid it, then use one of your gloves from airbrushing so that way you can still keep your model nice and crisp and clean, which is the goal. A bunch of little things make big differences when you put them all together. Okay, so there we go. We have turned everything ivory that we want to turn ivory. Okay, so now we're going to let that ivory dry all the way, and we're going to go ahead and take care of the wood. Now for the wood, we're going to use something I reviewed in a previous product review video. You can go watch the product review video on the scale 75 intensity set, but this is Intense Wood. Pause for laugh. Intense Wood is my favorite type. Is my favorite ink. I love some Intense Wood. I'm going to keep saying this until it's not funny anymore. But I'm going to take some of that, and I'm going to go ahead and get it out here. And we're literally just going to apply it straight away, like straight on. I'm actually going to use a slightly different palette here because the ink doesn't really need to go into a wet palette. That actually might cause some problems because it will run and soak through fairly quickly. Okay, so Intense Wood. Now, we did this extreme highlighting. We started with black, we shot gray at the angle, we shot some white just over the center, then we dry brushed. Why did we do all that? We did all that so we can take the wood color here and just run it straight over. And let's watch what happens. Okay. So as we lay this down, we can be fairly thick with it. I mean, we want to be controlled, but we want it to really soak down in there. You're going to see that what happens is you get that nice tonal variation of the grain of wood. Right? Instantly, that intensity just makes that look like wood. And that's probably good enough for us, given that, again, there's going to be two skeletons standing on here, and you will barely be able to see inside this chariot. So, we're going to put that to the side. I'll actually go ahead and hit the other one since I've got it out and it ready. Again, trying to double up on our steps as much as we can. These chariots really are pretty quick and easy to get done. And there you go. So now we've got our wood finish. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of this white out on this one, and we'll be back in just a second. All right, and we're back. And so you can see we've got both of them. We applied the white, and then what we do, we hit it with a little Seraphim Sepia because we want to age that out a little. And so now this is what we've got. So now we're going to want to just quickly re-highlight this back up. These are small areas. So we thinned out the same ivory we used before, and we're just going to run it here along the edge, the lower edge where the light would catch. And then we're just going to very carefully hit the top corners. Just a little edge highlighting. And then over here on these strappy things, we want to make sure the top of the straps are fairly bright. So we're going to go back over them. And same thing over here. So what we're doing here is just recreating some of the, making sure we've got some good tonal definition on some of these pieces. So again, we have a very thin paint here, and that's what we want. We want it to be very thin. Then we're just going to hit the edge of that, hit the edge of that, and there we go. We'll do another quick one. This isn't really quite a glaze. It's still pretty. It's just like a thinner, it's certainly a layer still, but we're trying to do these, they're just chariots. We're trying to do them fairly quick. If we wanted to take these up to display level, we'd probably do a lot more steps. We'd be working in much thinner whites, transitions, stuff like that. But this is about producing a good looking chariot quickly as the Tomb Kings begin their last march. And as I said, one of the good things you can do here is Tomb King's chariots, you can really be, kind of quick with them and still have them look pretty good. That's really the nice part about them. And that's good because a good Tomb King's army should have a lot of chariots. Like a whole lot. You want all the chariots. So again, same thing. All right, so we've got our ivory. All right, we're going to let that dry. One of the interesting things about white is that it goes on brighter than it finally dries. Because when it dries, it can often be, it's just going to dry a little darker. So if when you're applying a white, it looks a little brighter, keep in mind it will usually dim some. You don't want to rely on that too much, but you need to know what it's going to be. So now we're going to move up here a little bit. Grab some aged white. And we're going to repeat the same thing, just in a slightly smaller area. So now we're just hitting the very tops very quickly. We're going to hit the edges here. And again, we're drawing the paint down. The directionality of the brush is always very important. You always want to think about the direction you're moving your brush. So for example here, I want the light to be catching the edge of this to make it look like it's raised. So to do that, my brush, you'll notice the directionality of my stroke is down, because I want the paint to gather here at the bottom. Okay. All right. So there we go. Got that one. Good to go. And then we've got this one. So again, just a slightly smaller area. Highlight toward the edge. And then we're going to go ahead and hit this guy again, drawing the paint down. Always the direction we want the most intense portion of the paint to be in. Okay, and there we go. And that's highlighted up. Quick, easy, a few minutes to hit multiple chariots. Picks it out, looks pretty nice. Okay, so what's next? Next up, we need to pick out the little feathers on these things. Another reason why I hate adding these things is it just adds more unnecessary work and gets in the way of painting other things, but that's fine. For that, we're going to use a little light gray. With the feathers, we can afford to be a little, it doesn't matter. They're feathers. They have this extreme texture differential. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do a very careful little quick dry brush. So I just threw a little light gray on my brush there. Okay, and we've got these feathers right here. And so, yeah, there's a little blue on them. I don't care. It's on the highlights, and we're going to cover it over here. See? Just like that. And then again, over here on this group of feathers, just quickly dragging our brush along, catching the highlights. No big deal. Pretty easy. And there we go. Now we got that set of feathers done. Yay. Easy. Okay, so, but we're not going to stop there. Even though it's a little set of feathers, we're still going to go the distance. We're going to take a little of that ivory or that white we used in the previous step. We're going to get that on our brush. We're going to get most of it off. And then very lightly, and just on the top part here, right, we're going to dry brush that. Okay? So we have some variation in the tone of the feathers. Same thing, even though this is the opposite direction. There we go. Okay. So there's that. Nice and simple. And then because we want to go all the way on this tiny little thing, because we can do it quick, we're going to grab a little bit of Nuln Oil. And again, we're going to knock all of that back into alignment. So we're going to get a little of that ink, or sorry, the shade, the wash. We're just going to drop it in there, focusing specifically on the darker parts and toward the bottom. So you see how it's collected there and toward the bottom. I don't need to highlight everything. Make sure you stay away from your ivory there. Same thing. I want to make sure I get it down in the recess here. So we just drag it across. You drag it across. If you get a little too much on there, you can just sop it back up. But there you go. Now we've got a more extreme feather. Just that easy. Okay, so that's that little piece done. See? Coming together quickly. Now, the next piece is our time-consuming piece. Because really, this is ready to go except for the gold. So, for that, I am going to turn to my old friend, the Vallejo Liquid Gold. And I'm going to use the technique I showed you in the previous video, where I'm going to turn all of this gold. I'm just going to paint it. I went over this with a chariot last time. You can see I already did the wheels separately. And I will tell you my secret to doing the wheels when they're like this. I literally just took a pair of tweezers and dipped them into the liquid gold. Because it dries so thin. That has literally been dipped in paint. And you can see how smooth that dried. That is the advantage to liquid gold. Nothing else acts like that. So all my wheels are done, which are good because they're really annoying to paint with all those little sides. But now I'm just going to take that same liquid gold and I'm going to put it here and on this stuff. And when we come back, you know, on the front, when we come back, it's going to look like a chariot. So, we'll be back. Okay, so we have the gold applied, and basically you can see that now we're starting to look like a chariot. Like if we, you know, just pop the wheel on there, it's looking like a chariot. Now, you could stop here. One of the advantages of the liquid gold is that it does reflect light pretty well. But of course, we're going to go a little farther. And we're going to use the technique that I used in the in my highlighting gold hobby cheating. So basically, we're going to apply some Seraphim sepia over the whole thing. We are going to apply some sepia ink in the recesses, and then we're going to use the silver to pick out the highlights, say like the tops of the skulls, and then thin down the liquid gold again into a very thin state where we can then just run it over everything, tint the silver to gold, and you know, pick back out some of the shine that those two washes are going to knock out. I'm not going to do that all on camera since I already did it once on camera in that previous hobby cheating video. So I'm going to do that, and then we're going to come back with this all assembled, or you know, with this all highlighted and ready to go, and we're going to talk bases and how we do our quick sand bases, because we're going to get these two chariots ready to roll and roll down the enemies of the Tomb Kings. All right, we'll be back in a minute. And we're back, and the chariots are assembled. Basically, I did up the gold in the way that I described in the gold video, and I'll link that below so that way you can see that process. But you can see here how, you know, we've got the gold applied and we've got some shadows and things like that, and the highlights. And then I had already done the skeleton separately, again, as per the skeletons with an airbrush video. So that's those have been done, and then I just put them all together. So now let's talk about bases. So one of the issues with sandy desert bases is that they can often be pretty boring, because some people just literally throw down sand and then call it a day. Now, I'm not about that. Even when you want to be quick, the reality is basing is pretty simple and fast, and even on a larger scale, it doesn't take much to go sort of above and beyond and make it a little more visually interesting. So, with the bases here, you'll notice I've got some cork sort of glued down again. We just want to put in some rocks, break up the flatness of the sand. You know, if you've ever been in a desert, like, there are pure sand deserts in the world with nothing else in them, but they're not super common. Most deserts have something else going on, small scrub plants, little bits of rock, anything like that. And so I put them down in a way where the chariot can still sit on the base. There we go. All right, and the rocks will just be there kind of underneath and around to keep it interesting. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the way I like to do sand, and I've done my bases in a lot of different ways with sand. The reality is that there are many ways to do sand, and I have several different types of sand. In this case, I'm actually going to use the gray pumice from Vallejo that you saw in one of the previous videos when I reviewed this product. I am a big fan of this as a product, and it has a nice sand sort of look to it when it dries. And so we're going to get a nice big healthy dollop of it out of the thing here. So you can get a nice big dollop. And we're literally just going to spread it around. So we're just going to drop it on there. Right? And then we're going to just kind of spread it around as though we're spreading around peanut butter or butter on toast or something, right? The key being we don't want this to be even. Like, we're purposefully trying not to make it even. We want the sand to be sort of have varying layers and textures to it. But we do want it up on the rocks some and stuff like that. We're not trying to avoid the rocks. We're just spreading it around. Again, just think like your butter on toast. You don't try to make your butter completely even. You don't try to make it so but at the same time, you don't want areas of your toast sans butter. And so that's what we're going for here as well, right? So like we don't want little holes like that. But you can see that I have varying depths here, right? I'm not spreading it completely evenly. I'm just kind of whatever grabs me. The more random you make it, sort of the more you just kind of spread it around, don't really worry about it being exactly correct, the more realistic it will look. You know, sand is swept by wind and nature and now all that, and so hence it should be fairly random. So we just kind of spread it around like this, and so on and so forth. We just want to make sure we get all the things covered. We want it up onto the rocks, all those sorts of things. Okay? Until we have the whole base more or less covered in this. Now, one question you might be asking yourself is the chariot going to attach to this okay? The answer is yes. Because it's still going to be flat enough. We're not building huge ridges of this stuff. One of the interesting things about this gray pumice is that you can build like really big ridges. Like this is solid enough. You can really build it up quite large. But here we're remaining, you know, relatively flat. And we're just going to use these little rocks. With the reason we want the paste up and, you know, on the edge of it is because we want it to look like they're emerging from the sand, right? So we want it to look like they're down deeper, like there's portions of the rock we can't see because it's down in the sand, right? So there we go. And then the other thing I like to do is once I've got it, the rocks also help you pick up the base easier, which is nice. It's just give the edge of the base a good wipe with your finger. You don't need to be any more clever than that. If you want to be really clean and neat, you can do it with, you know, like a paper towel or something. But finger works well enough, just so you don't have a lot of the texture on the actual base, the side of the base itself, which you want to be flat and black. Okay? And so, there we go. That's like that. By the way, the little cork pieces, whenever I'm cutting my actual rocks, usually I have little extra things that have like flat sides or something like that. I just save all the little scraps in a baggie. And so when I want to do just scattered rocks or stuff like that or build up rubble, that's when you get these out. And you just kind of, you know, you can put the two flat sides, if you got cork that has a flat edge, you can put the two flat sides together like that and just make, you know, one normal rock, right? There you go. Easy peasy. So, what I'm going to do is I am going to finish, you know, do this other base the same way. And I'm going to let that dry. This takes a while to dry, especially in this amount. And then I'm going to just airbrush the entire thing once it's completely dry with with some Surface Primer Desert Tan. That's a very light color, but keep in mind, sand, like rocks themselves, can really be about any color. So you could start with, say, a deep brown and then dry brush up. I'm going to start with a lighter color and then do some washes and dry brushes. Again, all real quick techniques, just to add some different coloration to it. But you could start with a darker brown and then come up to like an ivory. There's lots of different ways to do it. And none of them are wrong, by the way. because if you just, Google image search desert, you're going to see very dark sands, very light sands, red sands, all that exists. So anything in this sort of earthy natural spectrum from, warm white, ivory, all the way down to like dark red brown, they're all perfectly viable colors for sand. So I'm going to put this on here, let this dry, put this on, and we'll pick up back up right there. Okay? See you in a minute. Alright, we're back a little quicker than I said because I realized that I was remiss in mentioning something that I wanted to mention. If you don't, this paste is going to dry and look very sandy because all the intervening paste is going to dry out and it'll leave you just with these crystals. But if you do want to have some size differentiation of different sand, if you're going for, if you want a little more variation as opposed to an even grain, you can take regular sand or different size, like this is my larger grain sand, this is my small grain sand. You can take this and just literally mix this directly in to the into the paste. And another interesting thing about this Vallejo paste is it will take that and hold that this other grit fairly well. You can see I'm just kind of pushing it in there with my finger. We don't need to be incredibly sneaky or tricky with this. So you can certainly do that. If you want to have some larger bits scattered about because you want, say, some, bigger rocks, you want to go, your theme is more of a rocky desert. Sorry. So we can take this and, same story, right? So we could put a little bit of the bigger rock there and there. Maybe a few there. Just something small. Again, same thing. I'm just going to kind of push it in there. And for the most part, it will dry and just get sealed in there. One thing you can do when you're done is just kind of spray it with, dab it with like some, a white glue water mixture or something like that. But for the most part, you can create that variation in texture by adding other size grit or sand or anything like that to the paste before it dries, and then let it dry and just harden up and shrink up around those. And some of it, of course, will come off, but that's true for any time you add that. In the same way, we're using this as glue, effectively, in this case, right? Okay, so now when you come back, you'll see it. All right, so we're back at the desk. Everything is dry here with I had dried the paste that went on. You can see where the little sand and the different size grit was worked in. It's nicely adhered. Then I went ahead and primed it in the, as I mentioned, in the desert tan, just a very nice light color. But as I said, you can do whatever you want. And then I just washed it all down with sepia, and so you can see this is what it looked like before, and this is what it looks like after. And when I'm washing this, I'm going pretty heavy. Like I'm just using a big old crappy watercolor brush to just dump a bunch on and then push it around, because I really want to soak down in those cracks in this event. And the reason being is that even though sand is, I don't know, it's really, it can from a distance look very monochromatic. It's not, and that's my problem with using sand straight out of like some kind of kit or something, out of a terrain set, because the problem is with scale. Like sand is already very small, and you're trying to make miniature sand. Like the reality is that the sand here on this base is 1/44. It's supposed to be the grains are supposed to be 1/44 the size of a normal grain of sand. That's one of the reasons I don't like big flakes or big grit of sand, is because it's not the right scale. If you use normal sand, say like you go buy beach sand, okay, if you scaled that up, keep in mind your figures are supposed to be 1/44 or something the size of a normal person. So you got to scale up that base grit too, meaning each individual sand grain that you stick on there is supposed to be 44 times larger if brought in reality. That would be pretty big. That would be big old sand. So as a result, that's why I like using the paste, because it does, to my eye at least, look more appropriate scale-wise. Okay? So, but you know, you certainly make your own decision as to what you like for your basing, because that is always the right choice. But so as you can see, I'm just coating this thing, and honestly, I'm hitting the rocks too. We'll pick out the distinction with the rocks through our dry brushing and maybe a little bit of washing later. But so obviously there we go. We've got that all done. We make sure we get it down in all the little nooks and crannies, all the way to the edges. You know, if we get over the edge, who cares? We're going to go back and paint the edge of the base and such later. So that's perfectly fine. And there we go. So that is ready to go. And once that dries, we're going to come back in. We'll do our last couple steps of painting this up, attach our chariots, and we will be good to go. And the first step of the hobby cheating for last March, the Tomb Kings, will be complete. So there you go. We'll be back in a minute. All right, and we're back for the final work on the bases. Here we go. So you can see the wash dried there, and now we've got something that I think looks, you know, pretty sandy. You can see how, because the wash doesn't soak into the rock as much, we get this natural color differential between them, which is good. That's exactly what we want. But of course, it does still look a little quirky, so we're going quirky. Yeah, sure, why not? So we're going to handle that now. So here comes the big secret to painting sand. Are you ready? Da-da-da-da. Sunny skin tone, or whatever. Flesh tone. That's the secret. I'm going to use Vallejo Model Color Sunny Skin Tone. You can use many different kinds of flesh tone. Flesh tone is the key to painting sand. Flesh tone is just a wonderful thing for a lot of purposes. Good for thinning purple. Good for doing blonde hair as a base. But in this case, it is going to be one of our sand colors. So we're going to give that a good shake. Get some of that out on... I'm just going to use a normal palette here because we're going to be dry brushing. So I don't want it to be all wet. And we're going to use like a massive dry brush for this, because we're going to be not too discreet with this at this point. Okay, so we get some on the brush. Of course, this thing, the bristles on this thing are ridiculous. And we ground it down in as per usual. And then we're just going to go like that. And we're going to move it across. Now, this first one, oops. It's not going to have a huge effect. And we want it, that's okay. We want to build this up slowly. And I'm not like pushing incredibly hard either, by the way. Okay, just to be very clear. I'm not ramming the bristles down into this thing. One, because I don't want to, I don't know, like, I don't need to. And two, because I want this to be a slow build-up of some color, right? So, if you can see now, the difference between those two. This one, a little bit lighter. This one, a little bit darker. We're not going for a huge change here in the first pass. And that's okay. Doesn't need to be the biggest. You don't have to do it all at once. So let's make this one look the same. Obviously, on like these big flat rocks, it's going to catch a little more and a little stronger. And that's what we want. So we're just very quickly, we're trying to catch, you know, the upper highlights of this stuff. Just get some color on there. We're not trying to make a huge difference in this first one. We just want to lighten up our sand a little bit, create some tonal variation between the wash that's soaked in and the surface. Okay? So there we go. Now we've got the other one lightened up too. Okay. By the way, if you start from your if you start from brown sand, as I mentioned in the previous one, to say you primed these in a very dark brown, this can be your first color, period. Okay, so now we're going to go to Vallejo Model Color, surprisingly, light sand. Funny that. Almost like that's maybe what it was meant to be. And the key with this is that sand, if you look at it, often has like can have a very sort of, you think of certainly white sand beaches or something like that, but beyond that, it can have a very light color to it. Now, I did not clean the brush in between, and that was intentional, because I want a little of that color to bleed together. That'll soften my transition here. Again, we're not hitting this incredibly hard. We're just wanting to catch the raised pieces. And we're actually going to kind of focus it in some different areas. Like what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that it isn't even throughout. We don't want it to actually be completely uniform. Like, so the way this is brighter here, but, you know, not as dark in other places, that's what we're going for. Or I should say brighter here, but not the same brightness in other places. We want that to happen because, again, we want that variation, right? By the way, if you think that's too light, if you look at it and you're like, oh, I lightened that up too much. Okay, no big deal. Go grab some of your sunny skin tone. Go over it. And it'll darken it right back down. Doesn't show too much on the video. Looks kind of the same. In reality, it looks different. I'll darken it down a little more. That way it shows stronger on the video. You can see I can just cover that over. And another nice thing that does is now we really have some good variation in the tone. So by hitting certain parts of it then with this sand, you can kind of go back and forth with the white and the sand, doing the same kind of tricks you would normally do with sort of layering or glazing. You're just doing it with dry brushing instead. So we're going to get the other one now. Try to do this quickly because I don't think a dry brushing tutorial is super exciting. But the point being is that you can't mess up here. Okay? I really want to impress that upon you. There's no mistakes. I'm not trying to channel Bob Ross, but it often happens. Like, there's just happy accidents, right? Like, the reality is when you go over this stuff, when you're doing natural stuff like this, it's just a variation of a lot of different tones. What you want to aim for is not uniformity. You want distinction. You want variation in your color and stuff like that. And you want to get it as cheap and fast and efficiently as possible. And something like this where you're just, like, I'm just dragging this brush across here. I'm not doing anything that requires any great skill or patience or brush control or steadiness of the hand or anything like that, right? This is, like, truly the simplest technique in the history of the world. And yet, by just applying it one or two more times, you can really get somewhere. You know, I was watching a video from Sam Lenz, who's a great painter, one of the best miniature painters around, certainly better than me, and he raised a very good point that if you do something right, great, do it 3 more times. And he meant on the same miniature. The point being is that by building up these layers, by, you know, attacking it slowly as opposed to just trying to do it one and done, you get a much more interesting effect and a much better product in the end. And again, you know, this is not taking me a long time. It's not like this is some great expenditure of time to sit here and do this on a couple bases and just kind of run back and forth a couple times between white and some flesh tone with a big giant brush. Because the flesh tone over, you know, the white is gonna, or over the ivory, the light sand, I should say, it looks different than it does over the, darker color that we started with. You'll notice I'm kind of just focusing on the rocks here for a second. I want to make sure they're nice and picked out. Okay. And there we go. And really, we could pretty much stop there. And, you know, I feel like we've got some sand. And that's why I like this particular method. I think it produces good-looking, natural variation sand, at least to my eyes. Certainly, you could keep doing more. If you wanted to take it more steps, just keep washing and dry brushing and stuff like that. Now, to fully take this up all the way, the last thing we're going to do is with these little guys. Deserts are rarely devoid of all plant life. It just might be a little stunted. So what we're going to do is we are going to apply a couple little tufts of grass, probably near a rock. Like I'm just going to look and kind of think, where would I put it? So So I like this little position here next to this rock. So I'm going to go ahead and grab one of those. Get one of my tufts off here. Oop. These tufts come from the Dice Bag Lady. You can look her up at thedicebaglady.net. I'll probably do a full product review of her services at some point in time, just because she's awesome and I get a lot of my terrain stuff from her. Excellent, amazing, fast shipping, tremendous service, and you usually get candy or tea in the box with it, just for fun, which is pretty awesome. So there you go. You just stuck a couple little tufts on there. I'm just going to drop a couple things of glue on so that I can quickly apply them. We'll do one there. Right there looks good. And let's do one on the back. You got to think about the fact that the chariot's going to be here. So, like, you know, you don't want to necessarily drop a... It's not okay. It's okay to cover some of your terrain work with your model. It actually makes it look more realistic because, you know, you could easily have that happen. Oops. Like, in reality, this thing is going to drive over terrain. It's not like there's no bushes just because the chariot happens to be over it. We're just going to stick a couple of those around. Just quick and easy. Again, this takes a minute. And it can just make your base really pop and look so much better just by having a little bit of variation there. It's not really color variation, it's just more like texture variation. But all those things are important to creating something that looks actually natural. The wild is rarely uniform. Okay, so there we go. There's our bases. So, base is done. Then all we do is we're going to attach our chariots, right? And there we go. So, all I have to do is glue those down, and then pretty much we're done. So I think we're going to call it right there. I don't think you need me to glue down a miniature for you, but I'm going to glue that down. I'll paint the side in like a dark, for my Tomb Kings, I use like a very, very dark chocolate brown. Always paint the frame of your base a single dark color. This is the frame of the picture. Frames aren't multicolored. They're just simple, and they should fade in the background. So I'm going to glue him down, paint the side, call it a day. So there you go. That brings us to a close on our chariots. Like I said, not really too complicated of a project, and you can get a couple chariots done pretty fast and easy and ready to go and crush the enemies of the Tomb Kings under their wheels. So the first March of the Tomb Kings video is done. I look forward to lots of other March of the Tomb Kings action from everybody in the community. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoy. See you next time.